This is the Tree of Life, Season 20, Chapter 6. In this episode, we will be returning to ways to resolve the enforcement problem and introducing a hypothetical solution in the form of twinning. To start out, in the last episode, we talked about how hierarchies can be rigid, that is, priority is established top-down, the higher compelling acquiescence in the lower. In this way, the allocation of spatial territoriality is maintained. That is, whenever someone exceeds their allocation or priority, acquiescence is compelled by force or authority, terminating a substitution event. Now, in the last episode, we did not explain that spatial non-consensuality is a product of exceeding an allocation through the networking of dissonant spaces via common negation with respect to specific objects of consciousness. That is, during a substitution event, sublimation leads to verbalization, and that verbalization can be transmitted to another within a substitution event, producing common dissonant spaces and thereby expanding beyond the allocation. Now, rigid hierarchies represent a specific solution to the enforcement problem. Namely, that the higher in the hierarchy impose their will on the lower according to their priority. This will is imposed on the lower during substitution events, or more accurately, on the vessel, whilst its objects of consciousness and self-representation are disconnected from the vessel. Thus, this application of force occurs within dissociative states. However, the objects of consciousness within these substitution events, those linked to self-representation, can be promulgated by way of sublimation and verbalization, linking substitution events as dissonant spaces. We also discussed how under tautological natural law, there is a distinct solution to the enforcement problem, which eliminates any need for force. That is, the trendsetter, or leader, becomes the incoming consciousness during a reverse substitution event, acting out the acquiescence of the outgoing consciousness and integrating it into their self-representation through emotional coupling. After the closing of the event, the impulse reoccurs with integration within the objects of consciousness and self-representation of the returned consciousness. In this episode, I would like to propose a novel solution to the enforcement problem. Now, the issue with rigid hierarchies is that they permit little flow of spatial territoriality from person to person. But in the absence of a rigid hierarchy, some movement of spatial territoriality from person to person is possible. So, the question becomes, how do you reduce the rigidity of a social hierarchy? There are ideological ways of doing this, religious ways, ways of altering social or societal structure, and ways of changing family structure. One such solution, which alters family structure, is in the flipping of social roles within a family. By rotating positions within a social hierarchy, this same lack of rigidity can be generated. Then, there are the societal ways of doing this, such as elevation by election or rotation of positions of authority. Then there are religious or ideological ways of doing this, such as represented by the religious theologies of Christianity or communism. In this episode, I would like to propose a hybrid of two forms, namely, societal and family structure. Essentially, what it would involve would be a legal mandate for twinning of births. Under this law, children would always be born in identical pairs, with common attributes, potentials, and capacities. This twinning would be combined with twinning of occupational roles. In these occupational roles, the authority would rotate periodically such that neither maintained a position of dominance for a prolonged period of time. By combining these two policies in a hypothetical society, one could prevent rigidity within allocations and limit the need for enforcement by societal structures. Such an arrangement would relegate enforcement to the twinned unit, which would rotate periodically to ensure shifting allocations. There are myriad solutions to the enforcement problem, which is the product of rigid allocations. In this episode, I suggest an example of one that has not thoroughly been tried historically, though there may be a few historical examples of its attempt. That's the end of the podcast for today.